Again, my name is Bob Erlenbusch. I'm the Executive Director of the Sacramento Regional Coalition to End Homelessness. I'm also the chair of the Homeless Deaths Working Group that put this report together for as a committee of Sacramento Steps Forward. This is a report of 501 coroner-reported deaths from 2002 to 2013. It is the most comprehensive report of its kind in the country. I don't know if Greg Wyatt is here, the coroner. We could not have done this report without the vision of Greg Wyatt, the county coroner, who we met with several months ago and had the vision to understand the importance of this report. And I believe that his passion for the issue, he volunteers with Loaves and Fishes. He's an ex-Vietnam vet and understood not only the plight of homeless veterans, but homeless people in general. In addition, Dr. Kassiri and Dr. Lockett and Edward, I know you're in the back, Edward Polvosky, there he is. He's a PhD student in epidemiology and biostats. He's the person who crunched the numbers. It made it easy for us, for me to write along with our committee. And if the members of the working group could just raise your hand. Joan, yeah, there's about 4 or 5 people here. Steve, Paula, thank you very much. Victoria. My comments are focused on highlighting the findings of the report. These are percentages, they are statistics, but as Seamus said, they mask the humanity of this report. And that's why the names of all 501 people are in the report, because when I did this report in Los Angeles, I had calls from all over the nation thanking me for finding their brother or their sister, their mom, or their dad, because that's who we're talking about. We're talking about loved ones, and our hope is that these 501 people did not die an invisible death. That in fact, their death, while it may have been invisible to many of us over the past 10 years, lifts their life up to be a catalyst for change, to find immediate and long-term solutions to end and prevent homelessness and prevent the untimely and in many cases preventable deaths of homeless people in our community. So let me go over some key findings real quick. The average was about 46 deaths over a decade, or 1 per week. And as Sister Libby said, they do 4 services every month, which is obviously 1 a week. 1 person dies, 1 a week, every week, year in, year out, over the last 10 years. The ages ranged between 19 and 81. The average age for women was 47, and the average age for men is 50. That equates to a mortality rate for the house population is per 100,000 people. Just think, and there's a sign up here that Seamus is standing in front of. It equates to, for the general population, per 100,000 deaths is around 680. But for homeless people, it's somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 per 100,000. If you remember anything, that's from today, it's 2 to 3 times higher being homeless than the house population in our community. The suicide rate among homeless people fluctuates between 2 times and 12 times the house population. The homicide rate fluctuates between 2 times and 5 times the housed population. In other words, as Seamus said, in general, the lives of homeless people are cut short by 1/3. If the life expectancy of you and I is 75 years, that's 25 years off your life by living outside. The 501 people were overwhelmingly male. Almost all were single, either divorced, widowed, never married. That was 75% were alone. 10% were veterans, and even though many of us think that, well, it's this time of year that people die. No, it's not true. It's almost evenly spread out across the seasons, pretty evenly spread out, about 25% winter, spring, summer, or fall. There is a map over here. One interesting thing was that half die on the weekends. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, over 250 of the deaths were on those 3 days, and we have a recommendation that seeks to address that. The map that you can see of the deaths, and thanks Edward for doing that mapping, generally it's in the downtown area, but look at the dots are people. Follow the transportation corridors. The manner of death, only 1/3 of the people died from natural causes. 40% were by accident. 1 in 10 people was either a homicide or a suicide. There's a chart up here of the top 5 deaths. And there are, if you read the report, there are differences by ethnicity and by gender. But overall, alcohol and drug-induced deaths were about 28%. Injury, 18%. Cardiovascular disease, followed by infection, again, another preventable cause of death. And gunshots and stabbings accounted for 5%. In other words, if you combine injuries and gunshots, knife wounds, and stabbings, almost a quarter, 23% of the people we're talking about died violent deaths. 23% died of blunt force head injuries, being shot, stabbed, or hung. And of course, some of those hangings could be suicides, but nevertheless, it's just a chilling statistic of how violent it is out on the streets. 60% had gone through the county clinic. In other words, 40% had never accessed health care that we know of. 33% were seen by winter shelter or other programs like Next Move or St. John's Shelter, etc. So in other words, almost over 70% didn't go through the system that we know of. But 77% were in custody at some point in their life, of their homeless life. Almost 80% were in jail, but only 60% got health care, and only 1/3 had ever been inside of a shelter. 10% passed away, and most of these people were coming out of winter shelter. It just made me cry when I saw that 10% of the people we're talking about passed away either 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, up to 7 days from leaving a program, and 50% passed away within 6 months of exiting winter shelter. 50% died 6 months after exiting a program. That cried out to our committee that we need 24/7 services on the weekend to make sure that people don't pass away after leaving a program. Based on these findings, our community recommendations focused on and I'm just focused on the highest priorities. We're calling on the Board of Supervisors, the City Council, and the surrounding cities to put together a 2014, in the first quarter of next year, a homeless deaths policy forum, so policymakers can understand the nature and causes of why people are dying out on the streets that are preventable, and then what the county and the cities are going to do to lower that number significantly. People need housing. They're dying on the streets and outside because they don't have a home. And we have representatives here from the Sacramento Housing Alliance who are fighting 24 hours a day to increase the city and the county trust fund. Tammy, Jessica, who've done a great job calling for housing justice for homeless and low-income people, and that fight continues with the city and the county. We need to increase significantly funding for outreach and enrollment in Obamacare, in the Affordable Care Act, especially funding nurses and other medical personnel to follow the transit corridors. So we're doing outreach and enrolling people onto health care, many who will have health care for the first time in their lives. As I said, we need year-round shelter, and we need safe places for people to be until enough housing is built. And that includes, Steve, that includes Safe Ground. Steve is the executive director of Safe Ground, and additional safe places for people to put up their tents because we don't have enough affordable housing. We need increased funding for drug and alcohol programs, and finally we need transportation to be subsidized for homeless and low-income people so people can get out from the underpasses, get onto light rail for free, and be able to go to medical appointments in the hospital when they need to. And as Seamus said, we're talking about people. And 2 days ago in the Sacramento News and Review in closing, one of the deaths they highlighted was a recent, what appeared to be a murder of Vincent McKinney. He was recently murdered in Crocker Park. The irony of the last name of that person, McKinney, for some of you know, but many of you don't, that in the late 80s, it was Congressperson Stuart B. McKinney, who the Homeless Assistance Congressional Act is named after. The irony wasn't lost on me that one of the most recent murders had the same last name as the congressperson who died of AIDS, sleeping out with homeless people on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in order to push that piece of legislation